Okay. Now looking at from a budget side, a good and robust PM program, right, contributes to efficiency, reliability, and extends the equipment life. And they talk about robust, it has to be consistent. It can't be an item to where, well, you know what, for this year we're really going to pay attention to a maintenance program, and next year we're going to pull back a little bit. It has to be the same way every time. Okay. Coast Guard, I'll use that as an example. All your aircraft, rigorous, right, PM program. Because when it comes time to go out and do search and rescue, it has to start. I mean, that's never a given. Okay, that has to be there, right, for lives. Okay, minimize unplanned downtime. That's a given. How about productivity improvements? How would a good, robust maintenance program improve your productivity?
Minimizes unplanned.
Yeah, right. So again, remember the equipment within your building? I have to keep it functioning and operating. I don't want to send the folks home. And if it's a manufacturing facility, I want to ensure, say for instance, I'm building say for instance, I got a job, I'm the project manager, and I'm building a Frito-Lay's potato chip factory out in, where is it, in Casa Grande? I'm expanding that by another 300,000 square feet, right? The reason they're expanding is to what? Make more potato chips. But when I start production, once I hit that button, I want to start producing those potato chips. And I got goals, right, to sell those potato chips. So anytime that my conveyance systems, my air conditioning, my power, anything that goes down unplanned, unexpectedly, it's going to affect my productivity. Okay. Minimize emergency maintenance. Okay. Optimize materials and parts inventory. Okay. So let me see, Trevor, how would I optimize my parts inventory? Any ideas? By having a good maintenance program?
You have enough backup parts, but not too many.
There you go. Perfect. Okay, because inventory costs money. So if I have too many, yeah. And then also, you also have shelf life on some of these parts and pieces of equipment. You know, it's like the folks that hang on to fan belts in their trunk. You know, well, how long has that fan belt been in there? It's been in there for 80 years. What do you? Am I going to trust that fan belt in the middle of the desert? Probably not. So some of those cases, you're going to have shelf life you've got to look at. Okay. Some will have endless shelf life, like a breaker possibly. But then in some cases, if it's a motor, you know, you're still going to have a maintenance program, because once you buy that motor, you start a maintenance program. But then folks argue, Patrick, but we haven't installed a motor. Why do you need a maintenance program for that motor? Well, you've got to remember, if it's a 60 horsepower motor, the shaft and the weight on those bearings when it sits there year after year after year, they have this effect to what? It flattens out the bearings. So you're going to have a maintenance where you go in and you spin it. It sounds goofy, but you go in and you spin that shaft, right, to make sure you're lubricating the bearings and you're also giving them time, right? Did anybody see the Barrett Jackson auto auction? All those cars? Anybody see that? You wonder, all those, right, collector cars, muscle cars, right, that nobody ever wants to drive. You know, one of the worst things you can do to one of those cars? Let it set. It's a showpiece. It's a museum. It's a trailer queen. Oh, yeah, right. The seals dry out. Seals in the transmission site. Okay. Brake fluid goes bad. Gas goes bad, right? But it's a nice-looking car. It doesn't run, but it's a nice-looking car. So part of that is going to be regular, routine operation of that particular car, and then the maintenance associated to that. Another argument. You have an old muscle car and you only put 500 miles a year on it. Should you change oil every year? What do you think?
Yeah.
500 miles? That oil is good for at least 3,000 miles. Why do I need to replace the oil? It's going to be it's going to be perfectly good oil. What happens to oil when it sits in your engine block? You pick up a lot of moisture, right? From within that. That's why when you run your car, an older car anyways, you want to run it up to temperature at least for a period of time. So you can burn a lot of that moisture out of that block, right? Bake it out of that block. So again, yes, you're going to replace that oil. And you drain it and it's like, look, it's some perfectly good oil. But it has contaminants in it, even though you only drove it 500 miles, right? Okay, some of those requirements. Improve and sustain superior equipment performance levels. And again, I go back to that analogy of the vehicle. Okay. And remember this one here? What was the 92%? That might be on a quiz too, by the way. Okay. What's the 92%? What's the biggest cost in that 92%? Yeah, the salaries of the occupants. You know, the building itself, right? You know, the building cost $2 billion to build. Wow, that was an expensive building. But the biggest cost in that $2 billion building is the 30 years of people actually residing in that building, right? And the productivity. That's what makes the money, right? And look at this. Maintenance is only 6%. So remember those numbers. 2% is typically of the overall building construction cost. 6% is going to be overall maintenance over the life of the building. The biggest is going to be the occupants, salaries of the occupants. Okay, downtime is money. Okay, the 2% was construction. Yeah, cost of construction. Yep. So, and again, you know, I go back to that $2 billion building, right? Like Intel. I don't know what the Intel facility. It's got to be at least close to $2 billion, right? But the biggest item in that Intel facility is the products coming out of that building. That's what's going to make the money for Intel. Okay, it's not so much the cost of the building, but what's the productivity level of the occupants on that. Okay, all right. So predictive maintenance tasks typically are going to include calendar days and when you're going to perform the maintenance, right? The usage amount. Okay. On your vehicle, you do it by mileage, right? My stepfather passed away like 3 years ago. And my son inherited his little Jeep. He had a little Jeep pickup, right? Nobody in the family wanted this Jeep pickup because it sat for 8 years. It had flat tires full of dirt and dust and everything else, right? But my son was 13 years old. To him, that was his car, right? So we spent a couple years restoring that old Jeep. But when you open up the hood in that Jeep, you can see, well, he wrote down everything on the bottom of the hood. When he changed the air filter, changed plugs, a rotor, condenser, spark plug wires. I mean, you can see the whole history when you lift up that hood, right? So it's like, wow. Huh?
Grease pen?
Yeah, a little marker, pencils, pens, whatever he had to write with, right? But that was his log. I mean, if he wanted to know when he did something, he'd open up the hood, and there you go. Let me see. That's less later. Yep, I did that 6 months ago, right? But again, that's part of the usage. He's identifying the usage, put the mileage on, then put the date, right? Now we what? We can put it on an Excel spreadsheet. Write it down on a notebook, your day timer, even put it in your BlackBerry right under your memo notes and so on, right? So it kind of gives you an idea on the usage, right? And integration. Why would it be good to integrate your maintenance practices? Let me see. I'm going to keep picking on. So I get your names. Jesus, why would you want to integrate that? Why do you want to tie all your maintenance practices together all at one time? What's your thoughts? Makes it easier. You have everything there. Would be a good one. Okay, what else? See, John, right, John?
Yeah.
Zach, I'm getting good.
Just to like save time if you're only doing one thing to go ahead and do multiple.
Yeah, right, because I'm going to be there with what, my tool bag. I'm going to be there with all the parts, and there's 6 pieces of equipment that take the same parts. So when I schedule that, I'm going to schedule it for all 6 at one time. So I use one mechanic, one tool bag, one set of parts, and I'm done. I don't have to send someone back up there. Especially if I got to get a ladder. I got to drag a ladder up to the 2nd tier parapet wall because my construction manager didn't give me a roof access ladder, so I got to get an extension ladder, right? I'm picking on you construction guys, right? Okay, so with that, you know, I take one ladder, one tool kit, right? And one set of parts, and I finish everything at one time, and I crawl off the roof, and I'm done for the next 6 months. So that's integration. So I want to tie everything that I possibly can into that. Okay, fixed and reoccurring, typically within the task, so they're going to be the same every time. Okay, to maintain that. They're going to be typically floating, so I got some flex time or within a certain time frame. So 2, I can give or take a month, depending on the piece of equipment. So if I defer it by a month, I'm still okay. But in some pieces of equipment, it's critical. I can't do that, such as aircraft. Aircraft have a set determined time when they actually tear down the motor, so many hours of flight time. Airframe inspections, right, landing gear, and so on. So when I get on my, a lot of you folks have flown, right? Everybody's flown in this room, okay? Have you ever thought about the maintenance on that plane as you sit there getting ready to take off?
Only if it's Aero Mexico.
Yeah, right? So typically you're sitting in the seat, right, and you're not thinking about, did they actually check the oil in the engines? You know, did they check the air conditioning systems? How about the auxiliary power or the backup power? Communication systems. How about the autopilot? In case something happens to the pilot, right? You're not thinking about all those things. Somebody else is paid to do that for you. What you're supposed to do is get on the plane, start thinking about your vacation or your next destination, right, and start planning that, okay? Now, you remember that cruise ship that had the fire? Remember that one? And it was what? It was disabled out in the middle of the ocean. The sewage system shut down. The water generation system shut down, so they had no fresh water. Remember that? And I believe the Coast Guard was involved in that too, in rescuing some of these folks.
Is
Okay.
that the one that the captain got off the ship for the?
No, that was the one that he got too close to shore and it capsized. Yeah, that was I think it was an Italian liner. Okay. But again, you know, everybody that got on that cruise ship was anticipating, look, I'm going to enjoy the, you know, the festivities, the food, right, the entertainment. I'm not thinking about a fire in the engine room. And then even so, if it has a fire in the engine room, captain calls up in the intercom and says, we excuse us and pardon us for the inconvenience. We have another liner that will be showing up in the next 2 hours. Please pack your bags. The entire trip's on us. The other ship pulls up to go across the other ship, and they're back on. That didn't happen. They're stuck on that ship. No lights, right? And of course, what happens to all the food? So now you got food issues, right? Okay, so other health-related issues, okay? And the last one would be templates in the work plans. Typical work plans is what? The instructions and the directions on how to do that, okay? So this little example here is a recirculating hot water system. So this is your boiler, recirculating pump. And it pumps what? Heated water through the radiators, right? And it sends it back through. It heats the water back up and starts the cycle all over. Right? So every one of these components, according to this here, is going to have some sort of maintenance. So the controls, the valves, the pipe itself, the radiators, calibrations, replacements, inspections, visual inspections, okay? That's going to be part of your maintenance program, okay? So preventative maintenance, planned actions undertaken to maintain a specified level of performance by performing repetitive scheduled tasks on a regular basis that prolong systems operation and useful life. Useful life, do you remember that curve that I showed you? I want to extend that life of that piece of equipment for as long as I can. Okay? I go back to the folks, and you always hear this, and I'll go back to the car auction. Somebody had a 1970 Chevelle in high school. Right? It was an LS6 454 convertible, and you hated that car because it ate too much gas. So you sold it when you were 22 years old, and you sold it for $600 to your best buddy, right? Would you be contacting your best buddy right now and asking him, hey, do you still have that car?
I think you would.
Right? It says, yeah, I restored it, and I just sold it for, you know, $150,000. What do you ask? It's like, oh, I was just checking. Just wonder how it ran. You know, some cases the investment, okay, is going to outweigh this usefulness. The investment, such as in this particular vehicle, vintage car, right, is going to tell me that, one, I need to have a preventative maintenance plan for this vehicle because, one, it's valuable. Well, every piece of equipment I have in the facility, I'm going to take the use building. All the air handling systems, power distribution, they all have a useful life to these pieces of equipment. So what ASU wants to do, facilities, I want to expand. Do you think they'll probably tear down this building when we move, right, John? You don't think so? Do you think they'll just refurbish it, move someone else in? Yeah, they'll probably put facilities in here. Yeah, okay. But for the most part, when you move out of this building, it will probably be refurbished. The equipment will have a condition assessment done on it, determining what needs to be replaced or upgraded, and then the use of the building is going to play a big part. But again, I want to maximize the life, prolong the life of every piece of equipment for as long as I can. Inspections, cleaning, lubrications, and of course part replacement is going to be included in that. Okay. Now, here's going to be an important one: deferred maintenance. Okay. A list of unaccomplished maintenance tasks, situations arising from shortages of funds, personnel, or specific practices, and also access. I may have limited access. Again, I go back to that air handler in my conference room, right? I'm going to have limited access to that particular piece of equipment. I can't get to that. Okay, so that's going to require a deferred maintenance plan. Again, all I'm doing is just keeping track. So it comes back, right? It's going to be the first in, first out. So the next month it comes up, those pieces of equipment are going to be the first priority to get maintained and again serviced, be placed back in operation. Okay. So do you remember this chart? Okay. What happens if you provide too much maintenance right here? It reduces your repair costs dramatically, but how come it would increase your downtime costs? Right, because I'm always in there, performing the maintenance in this particular piece of equipment. So remember this one here? I want to hit that bathtub curve. Okay, so I want to manage that. The less maintenance that I do, okay, I'm going to lose lost productivity, and this is my maintenance. More repair costs, and again, remember the life of the equipment and the productivity of the building, occupants themselves. Okay. There's a life expectancy on every piece of equipment. Typically, an air handler is good for 30 years. A chiller is good for 30 years. Air compressors, that's sometimes good for 20 years. I can go right up to those years, and I can expect to replace them. But in today's and capital investment and so on, I want to extend that as long as I possibly can. Good maintenance practices. Okay, and allows for comparison of actions having different life expectancies and to account for the time value of money. Okay, the time value of money would be typically, rule of thumb, $1 today is worth more today than it will be next year, right? Inflation. I won't be able to buy what I can for $1. Say you go back in time and you had $100 for groceries and the year was 1932. $100 for groceries would probably buy you enough groceries for the whole year. Okay, fast forward to 2013, how much groceries can you buy for $100? It's like 2 sacks, right? That's it. That's $100. That's it, right? Again, inflation. So when you look at the time value of money, anytime that I can prolong the replacement of a piece of equipment and I can take that capital, say for instance, a chiller typically the cost is $250,000, $250,000 for these units. If I can prolong that, replacing that by 5 years, what can I do with that capital investment? What can I do with that $250,000? I can invest that $250,000 for 5 years at prime and pull back interest, couldn't I? And can you imagine if you had 18 buildings and you were planning on replacing 18 chillers, but you go back to your finance department and says, nope, I think these things are going to last for 5 more years. We can go ahead and defer replacement. Take the money you had earmarked to replace for capital investment and invest that in another company, high risk, whatever you want, right? So what are you doing? You're generating funds for the company based on your maintenance practices. You're prolonging it, right? Okay. Vehicles. Typically, how long do you own a vehicle for? What do you think the average?
I'll bet you it's under how long it takes you to pay it off.
Well, say you got a 6-year loan on it, right?
Yeah.
6 years, you're working to pay this car off. Good maintenance practices during all those 4 years, or 8 years, 6 years, right? When you pay off the car, it's still in good shape. It still runs. It's still reliable. You know what? I'm going to keep this car for another 6 years. Why not? How come it never happens?
Because you get tired of your car, you want the new one.
See that?
No, I was just...
No, but typically that's what usually happens, right? There's the new model, different color, more sportier, right? Right.
Resale value is so low.
Right, and then you can sell that, right? Better gas mileage, right? Okay. So,
Like 150,000 miles, your resale value goes down a lot too.
yeah. So the car then, Trevor, if it is, I got that right? Trevor, see that? Okay, it's the only name I remember, but anyway, no, I'm just kidding you. Okay, so in your car, say it does have 150,000. Does that mean that it's bad, that it's worn out? You could have 150,000 and that car is just in good a shape as a brand new car, right? Regular maintenance, routine maintenance, and inspections on the vehicle, right? It's old. The only thing you got to get through is an old car. So when you drive down the road, you go next to a new car, it's like, hey, look at that, that's a new car. But what do you got going for yourself the new owner doesn't?
No payment.
You had no payments, your insurance is lower, right? You know everything that goes wrong with this car, right? You know that every 40,000 you're going to have to do a brake job on it. So these things are what? You've already got trends working on this car. So you already know exactly what you're going to spend on this car. And what do you take with the payments? Do you take the payments and invest them? Buy another car, right? So, you take those dollars and you invest them, right? But you keep that car for certain. And that goes the same way with building infrastructures. You want to maximize those. Okay?